It's past two. I just want to welcome everyone and tell you all happy Friday. We are very excited to have you here today, sharing with us our first virtual workshop ever. This allows us to stay connected while self-isolating from the comfort of our homes. Those of you in the front lines, we are very grateful for all your work and continuous support towards our community. And we just hope that you are able to learn helpful tips on how to budget during this rough and difficult time. We will be giving out an Amazon gift card. We just want to make sure that you sign in. You can do so by clicking on the link that I just provided on the chat room, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. We're going to be doing that today, so make sure that you do sign in. Also, if you want to mute yourself, just click on your box with your name. So at the top, you're gonna find a little box that says mute. Just click on that. If you're not speaking, we do ask you to mute yourself, just so that we don't interrupt the presenter. Another thing, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, if you could post those in the chat room, and we will make sure to address them throughout the presentation. With that being said, we hope you learned so much and you enjoy this workshop. And now I would like to introduce Keisha Thompson, who will be our presenter today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you, Sam, also for putting this together and everybody on Sam's team. I appreciate y'all getting this together for us. Also, please, particularly if you are a TRIO student, please make sure that you do sign the link that Stephanie provided, because I want to make sure that I get your participation for this event. Again, as Stephanie said, please make sure to put any questions in the chat. If there's anything that I'm not being clear on. Sorry, really quick. Whoever the host of this event is, can you make it so that I can share my screen? Because I put a PowerPoint presentation together. I will try to get the questions answered. I'll probably pause periodically to check the chat just to make sure, because if I'm going through something and you're not understanding, I just want to make sure that I catch it. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Give me just a second. Will it? How come it's not? Oh, wait, never mind. I see. Sorry, my first time doing Zoom. Can everybody see my screen? Yep, okay, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So this is something I put together to talk about, creating a budget, creating steps to financial wellness. This is part of a series. So some of what I'm gonna touch on, I think in another week or two, there's gonna be a workshop about home buying. So some of what I'm gonna be talking about is, setting yourself up for that kind of success. But I also recognize that we're kind of in some unusual times with the coronavirus and, people losing jobs. So I'm also going to be touching on how to budget in this type of a situation. Okay. So these are the stepping stones of creating financial wellness. So first, we're going to talk about what's in your credit reports. We're going to be talking about what a credit score is. I'm going to show you about creating a budget and how to stick to it. And I actually have a little template put together for an emergency budget. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then how you can begin to develop a savings plan. Also, before I get too far into this, Sam, if you have any questions or if you want me to elaborate on anything, just please feel free to speak up, because I can't see my chat right now unless I exit out of this. Okay, so as far as your credit report, I think it's important to note that you're entitled to one free credit report each year. It lists all of your debts. So we're talking credit cards, school loans, medical bills, any time that you have like your tenant history, any insurance claims, everything. It is a good idea to pull up your credit report once a year just to make sure that everything is accurate on it, because sometimes there can be mistakes. You don't want to pull your credit report any more than necessary. Anytime that you apply for a credit card, anytime that you are checking, like say, trying to rent an apartment, applying for any type of loans, there's inquiries into your credit. And so that means that when there's an inquiry on your credit, it can ding your credit. So it can lower your credit score a little bit. So you really want to be careful with that because it is much easier to lose points on your credit score than it is to gain points. Think of it kind of like your GPA, it works much the same way. Any questions on that?
I have a question.
What's that?
So with your entitled one free credit report, is there a best time to use that one free credit report, like before you do your taxes, or maybe towards the end of the year, something like that? Or maybe before you go into a new apartment?
I mean, I think I wouldn't do it before you go into an apartment because one, if you do it before it depends on where you're at, right? So a lot of credit card companies actually track your credit score. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat to that. I've noticed that the score isn't like 100% accurate because what has shown on one of my credit card apps versus what has actually shown up on my bank, like when I went to my bank to try to apply for a car loan, they were differing by like 40 points. And that's kind of like a huge difference, right? And so when you are thinking about running that one free credit report a year, something to take into consideration is what other inquiries have already been made within this year on my credit? Have I applied for any apartments? Have I applied for any credit cards? Have I applied for any loans? So if you're able to answer no to most of that, um, I think it would be safe to say, but if you're in a position where say you're like just trying to get your finances in order and you're opening credit cards and you're say you just moved into a new house or something, you want to be careful with it. So just I think be mindful of keeping track of the times when you know that there have been inquiries into your credit already. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Um, so talking about credit score, why it's important. So this shows a graphic on what a poor credit score is all the way to an excellent credit score. Ideally, you want to get it to the great to excellent period because that's going to get you lower interest rates. Having a good credit rate is okay. You're still probably going to have a little bit higher interest rates, but that's going to be where you stop having difficulty applying for lines of credit, applying for apartments without needing a cosigner, stuff like that. So basically what your credit score says, it's how likely and how timely do you pay your debts. And so the better your credit score, the lower that your interest is. Do I have any questions from anybody on this? Okay, so when we're talking about what makes up a credit score, this is super important to have an understanding like what goes into your credit score. So to the right of this graphic, you have 35% of this is your payment history. That's why it's super, super important to make payments on time. You don't want to be making late payments if they can be avoided. Um, Sometimes life happens and that's just absolutely unavoidable. But to the best of your ability, it makes up the bulk of your credit score. Below that is the amount owed. So again, on your um, credit card, they track your debt to income ratio. And so if you have higher debt than you have income, that generally is going to be something that lowers your score. And that's something that you can take a look at. I know I think on my Capital One credit card app, I don't have a balance on that anymore, but I still check it periodically to check my debt to income ratio and just to get a rough idea of where my credit score is. And that's where you can kind of take a look at that. I think it's pretty obvious. You want to make sure that you don't have more debt than income. Sometimes if you're somebody like me that has student loans, that's going to look a little bit different. I have, a number of student loans. I'm working on paying them off, but I do have a little bit higher debt to income ratio. Something else that goes into it, 15% of your credit score is made up of the length of your credit card history. It's super important that you do not close credit cards after you stop using them. The reason being, your credit card, your credit history is like count when they're taking into consideration your credit score, accounts your entire credit history. So say you have 10 years of credit, but you decide, oh, you know what, I'm not using that first credit card that I opened up 10 years ago. I'm going to close that. Well, guess what? You just shortened your credit history. And so depending on what happens within that length of time, that can also hurt your score. The longer your history is, the longer you show like, yeah, I've been able to pay off debt, even if you've been in some debt and even had bad debt, to be able to show that you paid it off and didn't eliminate parts of your credit history is super, super important. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on that?
I have another question. I'm
Yep.
probably gonna bug you a lot in advance. So I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. I like questions.
So my question with that is, why can't they just look at like your previous credit score reports, even though you closed out like a credit card this year? They can't like look at the past 5-year reports when you did have that credit card,
I think it actually gets removed.
like removed for good.
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
So if you pay off debt, like say, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I had some bad credit a number of years ago. I paid off all of my outstanding debts that I had, and I'm now in a position where I have better credit. But because those were credit cards that didn't get closed out but went to collections, it still shows that I paid them. And so that was actually useful to be able to show that I didn't close those credit cards and that I actually was able to pay that debt. It helped me boost my credit. If I had, say, closed those credit cards before, even though they would have gone to collections, that would still eliminate like all that prior history of being good on making those payments on time. Did I explain that clearly? Does that make sense?
Yes, that does.
Okay. So essentially, when you're closing a credit card, you're erasing any good amount of history of paying it off that you would have had as well. 10% makes up new credit. You want to be careful when you're applying for credit cards. If you're going to apply for a credit card or any type of loan, you want to make sure it's something that you're going to commit to and you're not just going to apply for a bunch of credit cards and see which ones you get approved for. You would want to apply for the best one and see if you get approved. And then if for some reason get declined, then apply for another one. You don't want to apply for a bunch because again, those are hits on your credit. And then 10% is the types of credits you use. So meaning student loans, credit cards, house loans, car loans, any kind of credit. Any questions on this?
Yes, I do have a question, please.
Yep.
Let's say if they already transferred to the collection agency. Let's say I had a collection account like 2 years ago, and they come on me and already reported again like last month. So how can I avoid this? So they do like they report 2 times for a collection, for one collection.
I've not had that happen before. What I would do if I were you is I would call both collection companies and see if you can clear that up, because only one creditor should be able to, and it might be, I'm not certain without seeing your credit card, your credit report. It might be something like your credit card reported the debt and then it got took over by a collection agency and then they also reported it, and that might be it. But I would definitely call both of those institutions that are reporting on that to try to figure that out, because you shouldn't have that twice on your credit report. Like when you run a credit report, because I've had to do this when I had, a number of outstanding debts, it listed them individually. Like I never had that happen. So I would look into that if I were you. But when you run your credit report, you should be able to see the person or the company that owns your debt and with their contact information to be able to call them.
All right, thank you.
Is that helpful at least a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
So Myra Zamora is asking, where does revolving credit fit here?
Where does revolving credit?
Mhm.
I'm actually not sure. That's a good question. I'm gonna write that down. Actually, Stephanie, can you do me a favor? Because I'm not able to answer that question right now. I just don't know the answer. And then I will look into getting an answer to you. And if you can also get her contact information so I can email that to her.
I'll do that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
This might be a silly one, but I was just curious, what's the difference between like amounts owed and new credits?
So your amount owed is all of your debts combined. So say somebody like me, I have student loans, I have a car payment, I have, actually, I think that's it. Student loans, credit cards, and car payment. And you said versus which other one? Sorry.
New credit.
New credit. So that's if I recently opened up another line of credit because I had a credit card that I was paying interest on, and I wanted to move that balance to a no interest credit card. And so that's going to be like, oh, you opened up this new line of credit. And I don't know what period of time passes before it's no longer considered new credit. I would imagine it's not more than a year. I'm not certain 100% on that, but yeah, so anytime, or if I were to say apply for a car loan and I'm barely getting into, or I have just recently done it. So it's very, very recent stuff. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
So for the last factor that makes up your credit score, the types of credit used, which was
Yep.
10%, are there, like, for instance, like common types of debt are like student loan, car payment, mortgage, credit card debt? What's considered like better types of debt to have that like increase your credit score?
I don't know if I know, like, say, for example, if you're somebody who has zero credit, one of the first things that they recommend is that you open up a credit card. Now, I know a lot of people are averse to doing that for a number of reasons, some of which we may cover. Um, but I don't know. I think it's less about what type of credit you have and more of, are you paying it down? Are you paying more than the minimum balance, or the minimum payment, which we're going to talk about in a little bit? Are you making payments on time? Do you carry high balances on your credit cards? I think that is more of something that goes into consideration, because if you look, the larger portions are your payment history, your amounts owed, um, and those are the types of things that make up the bulk of your credit score. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, and so a following question from Myra Zamora is, how fast can your credit card improve after lowering or paying off debt?
It really depends on how much debt you have, how long it took you to pay it off. Because once you begin to make on time and more than the minimum payments, you'll see steady increases. But again, it just depends on, one, what was your credit score to begin with. So like, what is your starting point? And then how long are you able to maintain that? I know for me, I had a bad credit score. I want to say it was around this 560 point. And I think it took me about 2 years to pay off, to begin to pay off my debt that I had. I had about $5,000 of stuff that was in collections. Now, also working against me, I also was taking out student loans at the time. So that was also kind of affecting my credit score, because that was affecting my debt to income ratio. But it took me about 2 years, and there were steady increases. And now I'm between like 700 and like 750. I'm like in the good range. Um, and it took me, I think, about those 2 years to get to like the fair to good point. But it really depends on like, where is your credit score to begin with, and how much debt are you paying off? Because how much debt you have, it might take you, a few years, or it might take you, maybe it's not that much and it doesn't take you that long, but there's a lot of different factors. So it really just depends. But the key is to go about it as aggressively as you can. and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Any other questions?
Michael Wickham is wondering, what is revolving credit?
I don't know. I'm going to have to find out. Can you please add him to that question so I can get that information out?
Of course. And then Amy Romero, do medical payments go towards your credit?
In some cases, yes. If a medical bill goes to collections, I've had that happen to me like by accident because for some reason my medical people stopped sending me a bill and I was like, I was stupid and I didn't save my account number. So even though I knew where to go to pay it, I didn't have the account number and it ended up going to collections and hurting my credit. So yes, if it goes to collections. Other questions before I move on?
Yes. Some of them say that if there is a collection, if it's already collected, and if you pay it off later, either like after 6 months or something, they say it doesn't make a change. It doesn't make any change. That's what they say. So is it a good idea to pay any collection that has been collected, like either like 1 years old or 2 years old, any amount owed?
I mean, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're saying even if you have something that is in collections for 2 years, should you pay it off? Is that basically what you're asking?
Yes.
Absolutely, because stuff will stay on your credit for years. So anything that is on your credit report that is outstanding, you want to pay because that's until you pay that off, that is really actually that is showing that you have a bad payment history, which again, if we look at this chart, that makes up the bulk of your credit score. So even if something's been on there for say 5, 6, 7 years, because stuff doesn't always fall off automatically, like they say. I've had stuff on my credit history for over 7 years that I just wasn't able to pay, or actually medical stuff that I didn't even know was on there, and it was still on there, and I had to pay it off. So absolutely, you want to pay anything that is negatively affecting your credit. You want to pay that off.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to move on, but keep putting your questions in the comments, and then I'll keep checking in to see if we have any questions to move forward, because I just want to make sure I have a lot of other helpful stuff that I want to cover, and I want to make sure that we get to it. Oh, shoot, I think my screen, hold on, there we go. Okay, so these are things that you can do to improve your credit and to help you maintain a budget. So you want to pay your credit cards on time. You want to avoid those late payments, because if you're paying late on cards, not only are you getting a late payment tacked on to your credit card payment, which is increasing your payment, but you're also increasing your balance because you're having interest accrue on that, if that makes sense. And keep in mind also, when we go back to this the previous screen, your payment history. So like, are you paying your credit cards on time is going to be reflected in that. So you want to make sure to pay your credit cards on time. If you're in a position to do so, which you don't know until you actually make the phone call, you want to talk to your banks and your credit card companies to see about getting credit cards with lower interest rates. For those who, maybe you get income sporadically, maybe you don't have like a set paycheck, like I get paid once a month, so I just pay everything at the beginning of the month whenever my bills come in. So it might be helpful for some people to set up payment reminders if you get paid twice a week, or if you do odd jobs or whatever. You need to make sure that you're keeping on top of making sure that things are getting paid in time. Obviously, you want to reduce your debt, whatever that looks like. It could be like eliminating going out for dinner during the week, and I only go out to dinner on the weekends. It can mean closing off, like say my Hulu account. I have a Hulu account and I don't even use it, so I'm going to shut it down because I know it's not that much money, but that $5 is going to add up. That's something else that I could be spending that money on. If you miss payments, you want to get current and stay current. Super, super important. You want to avoid missing payments if you can. Sometimes life happens and makes that impossible. But after once you get back on your feet again and get yourself together, you want to get current and stay current. Keeping credit cards open will help improve your credit score. I've already talked about that. And also, I think one of the biggest things, and looking at it this way, will help keep you out of trouble is looking at credit cards as a way to build credit and not to be used in place of emergency funds. Like, so I've seen people that will have, they get a new credit card and they're like, oh, I have this $5,000 balance. I have all this money to spend. Just because it's there doesn't mean that you have to spend it. And I think that's a trap that a lot of people get put in. Like, if you don't have that $5,000 cash to spend in the first place, that shouldn't be money that you're putting on a credit card, because you're going to end up paying more than that anyways because of interest. So you really want to be mindful of the way that you are viewing getting that new credit card. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys can see me. Hi, I'm Kelsey. I wanted to know with the could you go back to the other page very quickly? Do you have any recommendations? Like, it says talk to the bank about getting credit cards. So I've been trying to get one for a minute now so that I can improve my credit. But I've been denied, and I think it's because my score is like 560. Do you know of any places? Like, I heard that Credit Karma even has credit cards, but I'm trying to, navigate where can I actually get one, and is that actually a good choice for me right now?
Can you see what I'm doing right now?
I can.
Let's see. So there's ways that you can like shop for credit cards. You can like compare credit cards. So I just put credit cards for low credit, right? And so sometimes they'll list their contact information somewhere. You might have to click into some more of this, but this is a good way to shop for credit cards. Because some of them will list like, oh, you can even search like credit cards for college students, and they have all kinds of different stuff.
Looks like it's BBB accredited, so that could be good. Compare cards.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so this might be one way if your bank's not willing to work with you. You might also consider switching to a credit union, because credit unions tend to be a little bit more helpful in helping you build your credit. I'm
actually with Canvas.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I mean, this might be another option with you, for you. Because like I said, you can call them and say, hey, like, this is my credit score. Do you think I would be able to apply for, qualify for your credit card?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So I would try that. And then another thing, I mean, I've previously in the past, when I was trying to figure out how to pay off my debt, I actually went into my bank and had them sit with me and like try to work out a plan for how I can pay off some of my debt. So that might be something that they would be willing to do for you, is like, hey, I'm trying to get my credit score up. I need somebody to sit with me and help me figure this out. That's what they're there for.
Like the financial advisor that they have available? Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. I want to move on to this because this is super important. If you have not pulled up your credit card statement, because I know like I pay all my credit cards. Sam, in answer to your question, yes. If you have not pulled up your credit card statement, please do so. If you look at here, so we have a balance of $3,278. The minimum payment is $106. If we look to the account summary, $73.78 of that minimum payment is going to interest alone, meaning only $25 is going to the principal balance of $3,278. If you look here down in this little gray area, it says if you make the minimum payment, it's going to take you 17 years to pay this off, and you're going to pay $9,345, over $6,000 more than the initial balance. If you up the payment by less than $30, it'll take you 3 years and you'll only pay $4,748, which is a little over $1,000 more than the initial balance. So please do that from time to time. It's super important. Get mad about that interest and start making more aggressive payments, because it's basically a trap when you're only making the minimum payments. Okay. Any questions on credit stuff before we go into budgeting?
I do.
What's up?
Yeah. So my name is Leslie. I was just wondering, like, because I've heard from different people that you should have different amounts of credit cards. I have one, but I also have one with like a store. But I know a lot of people say that you shouldn't go over 2 credit cards.
Store credit cards, first off, are the worst. They tend to have really high interest rates. I would encourage you to look at the interest rate that you have with your store credit card. I think they're a scam and I refuse. There's no need, like that little 3% that they're supposedly saving you on purchases. Look at your interest rate. It doesn't even balance out.
But is that only when you're like buying stuff? Because if you don't buy stuff, you technically don't have to pay any interest, right?
Well, if you're not carrying a balance on it, I guess it's okay. I mean, I think it also depends on like what your income is. Like, do
Okay.
you have enough to have like say 4 credit cards and to keep them within manageable balances? If you do, that's great. I have, let me see, I have 3 credit cards. I have 4 credit cards. I'm only carrying balances on 2 of them because I have moved my balances over to the no interest. I got no interest on for 18 months on 2 different credit cards. And so that's an easy way for me to manage my debt. I would rather not pay any interest and get that debt paid off more aggressively than if I were paying interest. But I can afford to do that. I'm not touching the other credit cards. The more lines of credit that you have open, it can, depending on the proximity of getting them together, it could like reflect negatively on your credit because it will show like hits on your credit, which again, you have to like get up when that happens. Um, there's something else that you can track on your credit cards. It's like your available credit versus used credit. If you have more, it sounds like you're not in this position, but if you're using up the amount of credit that you have like to the maximum, that reflects negatively on your credit score. So you just want to be mindful of those things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Keep asking questions in the chat and I want to keep moving. So when we're talking about budgeting steps, so obviously, and this is going to kind of tie into like this weird time that we're in right now where some of our incomes have, probably been affected. You want to make note of what your current income is. You want to explore any benefits that you may qualify for, which I have a slide about that in a minute. You want to determine, particularly now more than ever, what your essential expenses are. You want to see if it's going to be possible for you to build a savings. I have an emergency like budget put together for you to take a look at what that could possibly look like for you. That's a sheet that we will be sending out to everybody, so you might be able to use that for yourself. You want to see if there's any way to cover any shortfalls. So if you're having more debt than you have income, there might be some things that you can do about that, and finding supplemental income. Okay, so when making note of your current income, you want to see what money do you have coming in, thinking about your next scheduled paycheck, any student loan money that you may have, any other money that you may have coming in. And so I phrase this as like, we're in this weird time right now because some of you may be experiencing job loss. So you want to take into account any income that you can rely on, at least for this month or maybe for another month or so. And if you lost your job, how many more paychecks will you be receiving? So just, how much money do you have coming in before it's gone is essentially what we're talking about here. So you probably have been getting emails from MSU Denver. These are actually live links. So if you want a copy of this, I can actually have this sent out to everybody else too with the sample emergency budget in case you haven't looked into this information. We have SNAP benefits, any housing benefits that you may qualify for, because there's lots of rental assistance that you can be getting if you need it right now. MSU Denver has an emergency fund that if you are experiencing job loss, housing insecurity, food insecurity, might be something that you want to apply for. The link is here. You can also search it on the MSU Denver website by going to the Dean of Students, or you could search MSU Denver Emergency Fund because that's literally what it's called. You may want to consider looking to any food pantries. If you have lost health insurance and you need health insurance, they reopened up, and I don't know if it closed yet. I think they reopened up the Colorado Connect health insurance thing. for a period of time. So if you need health insurance, you might want to look into doing that. If you've lost all of your employment or partial employment, you might want to file for unemployment. If you have kids, you might want to look into programs that are offering breakfast and lunch programs for kids. Each county is offering this. It looks different by county, but here's a link for how to find that information. And then Denver Emergency Food Network, there's a waiting list to get help. And I'm not sure because I think this is like a new thing, but you might be able to get help with food through them. Do I have any questions? Okay. Again, these are live links, so I'll be happy to get this sent out to you. So that way, if you are in need of these resources, you can have them. So when we're talking about determining what our essential expenses are, so essential meaning stuff that you absolutely have to pay. You probably absolutely have to pay your rent or your mortgage. You probably want to feed yourself, so groceries are an essential expenditure. Any loan payments, if you're paying on student loans, I know that's been kind of adjusted. If you have loans, there's no interest. I think you still need to be making payments. You may be able to work something out with the loan company to put your payments on hold if you're experiencing any type of financial hardship. But I think car loans are still due, and mortgages are still due, even though I know that that's looking a little bit different for some people. Childcare might be a necessary expense for some of you. Utilities, I know utilities have kind of been put on hold a little bit. If you can afford to still pay them, you still want to pay them, because that just means if you're not paying, say, your electric bill right now, 2-3 months from now, you're going to have a much larger bill. And so it might make more sense just in the short term to pay, even if it's like a partial amount of your utility bill, you still want to be able to do that. And then credit cards, you still want to pay those. Okay, so I think now is a good time. I know I'm I have kind of reworked my budget so that way I'm building a savings just in case something happens to my job in this like weird time that we're in. I want to be able to have some savings just in case I don't have a job for a while. So you want to minimize your expenses drastically. And again, on my emergency budgeting workshop, I'm going to show you what that could possibly look like for you. Any excess money that you may have can be directed towards savings. You may not have any excess money that can be directed towards savings, but minimizing those expenses is going to be super important, especially right now. If you are able to build savings, that can be used in case there are any other changes coming in your income, or if you have any medical expenses come up. If you have insurance, a good thing about having health insurance is that you have smaller out-of-pocket expenses. So if you have to go to a hospital, you may only have to pay a copayment. So that might be a money saver for some of you. But then if you don't have money to make the payments for the insurance in the first place, that's something that you have to decide for yourself what makes the most sense for your budget. And if you recently lost your job, you may not be able to put any money into savings. But that's where applying for these benefits might come in help for you. Any questions? Okay. So when we're talking about building a budget, and I think I'm talking particularly right now, you may want to put a pause on your financial goals if you have experienced any kind of a cut to your income. So like for me, I have a travel savings account. Obviously not going to do any traveling anytime soon. So the money that is going into that travel account is actually essentially emergency money now. If you have multiple savings accounts, like I do, I have a regular savings account. And like I said, I have a travel account. All that money is now considered emergency funds. So if I lost my job, that's what that money would be used for. Cancel or pause any subscriptions. I know that we're all kind of cooped up at home and having Netflix is nice. And I'm not saying that you should cancel Netflix, but if there's any other subscriptions that you have that aren't being used, you should cancel those or put them on pause. If you are able to lower any of your fixed expenses, again, on my emergency budget, I'm going to show you what that could possibly look like for you. Reduce or eliminate spending on extras. I think now that we're all kind of quarantined, that's kind of easy for us to do. it's something that is helpful even in, normal life situations. If you're trying to build a budget and save some money, reducing and eliminating spending on extras is a good way to help you be able to save some extra money. Um, there can always be reductions made in food budgets. I've done that myself recently, just in an effort to try to save more money um, in the event that something bad happens, and just eliminate all unnecessary spending. So if you're shopping on Amazon a lot, you might want to reconsider some of that because you may not need all that stuff that you're shopping for. I think I heard something on like NPR that people were doing a lot of shopping on Amazon because we're bored at home and get tired of binging movies all day. But it may not be a good idea, particularly if you don't have a steady source of income. So I'm gonna pull up this. Oh, it won't pull up. Give me just a second. I'm gonna pull up this emergency budget thing. Um, okay, so this is just a sample that I put together. It's actually something similar. I found this on the internet and I just kind of tweaked it to be like reflect normal people's expenditures. Your rent may or may not be this high, but rent is something typically you can't reduce, but your electric bill can be something that you can reduce. Your cell phone bill can be something that you can reduce. You might be able to look at getting a cheaper internet plan. Car insurance may be something that you can reduce. Student loans, you can negotiate a lower payment, particularly if you're experiencing some kind of financial hardship. Food, you can reduce your food expenditures by just, being mindful not to be ordering a lot of Grubhub and, eating most of your meals at home and being mindful of like the kind of ingredients that you're buying. Can they be used for multiple meals? Stuff like that. Gas, obviously, most of us aren't really driving a lot. So that's a place where hopefully you're definitely already saving some money. If you had a date night budget, that can be eliminated. I don't know who has $100 date night budget, but some like to live it up. Any extra spending that you would have could definitely be eliminated right now. Same with car maintenance. If you're the type of person that puts money aside for holidays, vacation and beauty type stuff, like if you like to get your nails done or your hair done, obviously that's something that you're not spending money on. So this particular person here, this imaginary person, had an initial budget of 1,985, and by cutting out and lowering some of their expenses, we're able to get it down to 1320. So that's $640 some savings. So again, this is something that you're going to receive via email. So you might want to sit down and see if there's stuff that you can tweak within your own budget, and keep this handy just to help keep you accountable. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Sorry, I forgot how to unmute myself for a second. We had a question that came up earlier, but we didn't get a chance to ask it, but it's about credit card stuff. Do you want us to wait a little bit longer to ask it?
Let me see really quick. We can go ahead and ask it.
Okay. What credit cards did you do the balance transfers on? Was there a fee to transfer your balance from credit card to credit card?
Yeah, so I actually did what I showed you a little bit ago, and I shopped credit cards. Credit cards with low interest. Or what did I do? Oh, zero transfer fee, or no, with no interest. That's what I searched. And so I actually just kind of shopped them around, right? So let's just, it looks like I might have done this other one. I don't know. So yeah, I kind of shopped them. Oh, this is the one that I had open before. So I just literally did this. So it looks like this first one, Wells Fargo, has 0% interest for 18 months. The two that I did have, most of them will have a balance transfer fee, and that's usually 3%. I haven't seen anything higher than 3%. I don't know that they ever have anything higher. But in addition to looking for making sure that there was no interest for 18 or 21 months, I obviously, this 15 months, that's nice, but I want 18 months because that's 3 more months of no interest. But I also looked over here at the interest rates. And then so I just, I shopped it a little bit, and, looked into like other terms and conditions because some of them, have like there's no annual fee. You never want to pay an annual fee. Oh, here it is. Types of credit that are needed for that other person that had asked that one question. That's something that you want to keep an eye out. And so if you I don't put anything on those credit cards. So any of these highlights, any of these like points back, none of that really matters to me because I don't intend on putting anything on those credit cards other than just to pay off my current debt. But if that's something that you will intend to do in the future, that's also something that you want to look at. Any other questions? Okay. So when we're talking about, right now, I just bring this up because we're in a very unique economic situation, and some of you might have lost your jobs. If you have not filed for unemployment, hopefully by now that you have, because everybody has been talking about it, but if you haven't done so, please do so, because it does take a few weeks before it kicks in. It doesn't happen right away. I know everybody is wanting to stay inside, and hopefully you are able to do so. But for some people, like that means if I stay home, that means I'm not making any money because I'm not going to work. So lots of places are hiring. Amazon is hiring. There's even call centers that are hiring. There might be places like call centers, particularly if we're talking about working on campus. Everybody's working remote. So if you are out of money and you need to get income replaced, but you don't want to worry about, having to work in a grocery store, say, contact the people that you're connected to on campus and be like, hey, I need a job right now. Hopefully you will have asked for work study. I don't think that there is much work study left, but some people might have hourly money to pay you and you can work from home. And that's like, some income is better than no income. So that's something for you to consider right now. And another thing for some of you, you may have already been saving money previous to all this, and you may be able to make adjustments in your budget to continue to save money, and just take into consideration whether your emergency fund will cover your expenses and for how long. Any questions? Okay. So I think I've kind of already touched on this. I think another way to help you budget, particularly in times like this, is to find a credit card that doesn't have any interest, say for 18 months. So if you have a credit card that you're paying interest on, you should seriously consider, like, there's no better time than right now to stop paying interest on credit cards. And I don't know if I think various companies, credit card companies are doing different things for this, but you might want to call your credit card company. If you haven't heard from them already, I'm sure they have been communicating stuff. But if you're currently paying interest and there's no intention on their part for them to waive the interest or to put the interest on hold, consider looking into another credit card. I just showed you how to do it. I'll be happy to answer any questions in the next few minutes if you have any other questions about that. But that way, if you are only able to pay the minimum payment, there's less penalty because you're not paying any interest on it. And then 18 months from now, hopefully we'll be have this whole situation far behind us. And then your 18 months runs up and you still have a balance. You can then, guess what? Transfer that balance to another zero interest credit card once this no interest time runs up for you on this current one. It's just a good way to work the system. Work the system because they work you with that interest and late fees and all that stuff. For those of you who may not qualify for another credit card, say you have some debt or your credit score is just too low, call your credit card company and see what they are like. You have to be like, hey, I need to see what you can do for me because I want to continue to pay on this debt, but I'm experiencing some financial hardships right now. What can we do to make this easier for me? You have to be able to have those conversations. You have to be able to advocate for yourself. And if you get somebody on the phone that's rude, just hang up. That's what I've done. I've gotten so upset with people just giving me attitude on the phone. I'm like, you either put somebody else on the phone right now, or I'm going to hang up and I'm just going to get somebody else. Because you have to advocate for yourself, and as they are providing a service and it is their job to work with you. And you have to, you will find somebody that will be able to walk you through what that could potentially look like. Any questions? Let me get out of this. Hold on a second.
Actually, Tisha, I have a question again. Would you be able to go back to that screen, the screen you're just on? One of the things that I'm experiencing in my own debt is just like I think like 3 claims now where I really didn't understand what I was doing. So they're like now in collections, and like when you're saying apply for unemployment for like to get a little bit of assistance, right? Like I'm wondering, do they look at stuff like that? Because I do have an income, but I think I'm at a low enough point that at least for the amount of money that you're earning monthly, it would qualify. But do they look at credit cards?
No, they do not.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Any other questions? I'm trying to get my video back on, but for some reason, hold on a second. Hold on.
You go to the viewing options up at the top. This is Kelsey, and you do end share.
Got it. Okay, I'll be happy to share that any of the slides that anybody has questions on if needed. What other questions do we have? Should I go over to the chat?
I had a question on that last slide. You mentioned like doing a balance transfer at the 18-month mark.
Yep.
But what happened? Like, doesn't that ruin that streak that we built up?
No.
Like, keeping that credit.
Nope, because you're not closing a credit card. You're just transferring a balance.
So then we'll keep it both open then?
Yep. The only thing that's going to show negatively is a slight ding on your credit is that you're going to apply for another credit card. And that will ding, that inquiry into your credit will show negatively, but it's not a huge amount. And I think it works better over time because you're paying less money over time. If you're not paying any interest, period, you're paying less money over time because you're not having to pay any interest. So it's worked out pretty well for me. It's how I've been able to raise my credit score. Once I was able to pay off all of my debts that were in collections, this is the trick that I have used to kind of manage the debt that I have.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So is there a point to where like you should stop? Like, oh, I've balance transferred now 4 times and I have 4 credit cards.
Well, the whole idea of the balance transfer is so when I transfer balances, it's not just so I can pay the minimum balance without having any interest. It's so I can attack that more aggressively. And so that way I know that if I'm making a $200 payment on my credit card, every single bit of that $200 is going to the principal balance and not only a portion of it because part of it's going to interest. So that's the way that I look at it. Now, in a time like this, where some of you might have lost your job, that might be a way for you to just, actually make the minimum payment and still continue to, build your credit somewhat and make sure that you're actually paying on your credit cards and not having them sent to collections. So that's another trick, another way to do it. But if you still have income and if you're not worried about anything happening to your income to where you might have to be saving that extra money, it's a tool that you can use through these weird times that we're in right now. But I would only pay minimum payment if absolutely, like I said, if you lost your job and you're like, this extra, I could pay $50 extra on this credit card, or I can buy groceries. Obviously, you want to buy groceries,
Right. That helps. Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. I'm looking through I have a credit card from Discover and they have a student credit card. Almost everyone I know has gotten approved. Have I tried them? I have not personally tried them. I know some students have. I mean, again, it depends on, what your credit score is, what is their credit score range for accepting people. Yeah, I think there's there's some stuff that depends. Also, you want to be mindful of, like, are you using it to build credit? So that means if you're using it to build credit, then you're not putting, like, say, oh, I just had this emergency come up and I need to max out the credit card rate. Um, Stuff like that you just want to take into consideration. Let's see, Nicole, I have an unused credit card. Is there ever a time I can close it without it negatively affecting my credit score? You just don't want to do that, because you lose that credit history. You lose that credit history. So don't do it. The only time I would ever say to pay, or sorry, to close a credit card is if you are paying an annual fee on that and you're not using the credit card, but you should never get a credit card that you have to have an annual fee in the first place. Just don't use it.
Sorry. One thing I want to say though, Tisha, you talked about this at another workshop. I had a credit card that was one of the first ones that I opened, and it, like, I don't want to say closed, but it closed on its own just because I didn't use it
Yep.
for a few years. And for me, to help me establish credit, I opened up one at Old Navy and one at Macy's or something when I was young. And both of those ended up closing on their own, and it didn't have an impact on my credit score. And
Right,
so I just like didn't use them at all.
right.
So if anyone has questions about that, like they do close themselves after not being used.
Yep. But the point is to not close it yourself. Yep.
I know earlier you mentioned, I think you said shop credit cards are
Yep.
the bad ones. So is there like a type of credit card that you do recommend? Because I have a couple of friends who are getting like, I guess like airline credit cards and stuff. So flights can be cheaper in the future.
I mean, for those, because I actually did a lot of research on credit cards that have miles on them. And you have to really be a traveler and you really have to be spending the money on those things that you get points on those through. So it might not even, depending on what that looks like, because every credit card is different, that might be beneficial. Like I have a friend who puts all of his bills on one of his credit cards. Like he literally pays everything with this one credit card because he gets miles for freaking everything. And so that's worked out very well for him. But not all credit cards are like that. Like my Discover card, every like 2 months, what I get points for changes, and I can use those points on miles. But if I'm not spending money on those particular categories, then I'm not getting points. So it might not be, you really have to be mindful of what the terms are for getting those points. So that's not a bad one. Getting points can be beneficial. Again, taking into consideration what is your interest rate at if you are paying interest on it, and just any department store credit card, any clothing store, Best Buy, they have really high interest rates. There's really no benefit. They try to say like, oh, you'll open up right now and you'll get 3% off every purchase, but you're paying 23% in interest every month. Does that 3% that you spend every few months does it really add up? Probably not.
Is there an interest rate that you suggest that we shoot for?
Well, it depends on what your credit score is. Your credit score is going to determine what interest rate that you get. So one of my credit cards, the one that I have through my credit union, I think the interest rate is like 10 or 11%. Most credit cards have between, I would say, 15 and 26% interest rate. The lower, the better. But that is going to be determined. It's not like, oh, I want to look for one. Yes, you want to look for one with a lower credit score, or sorry, a lower interest rate, but your credit score is going to determine what you actually qualify for.
Man, 10% is awesome. I had
Yeah.
one at like 18% and I hated it. So
Yep.
that's awesome.
Credit Union.
Noted.
Yep. Credit Union of Colorado. Any other questions?
I have one that might be good for everybody. I don't know if you actually went over this, so sorry. Do you suggest paying or is it not suggested to pay your student loans with your credit card?
No, because your student loans typically are going to have, okay, quick note about this. Student loans are just like a credit card. If you're only making in the minimum payment, you're literally chipping tiny, tiny bits at the principal balance. So you want to be making larger payments on your student loans, if at all possible, because it's the same concept as a credit card. But your student loans, if you have them, if they're federally funded through the federal government, they're going to have interest rates of between 4 and 6%. You're not going to get a credit card with an interest rate that low. So if you're paying interest on your credit cards, no way, don't do that.
Okay, good to know. And also to go off of that whole thing that they're doing where they're trying to see if we can cancel student debt and all that, like, do you suggest that we just keep moving forward with those ideas and those tips to just pay it, instead of like not paying it in hopes that it will cancel out? Do you know what I mean?
With your student loans?
Yeah.
If you can, if you are in a position to do so, I would, if you're not worried about anything happening to your income in the future, yes. If you have a job that, my industry, is already hurting and it might, I might lose my job in a few months. If you're in that position, you might want to reconsider that. You might want to contact them and renegotiate a lower payment in the meantime. Um, and if you've lost your job and you're like, well, I have rent to pay, like obviously that kind of is more important. Then like those student loans aren't going to go anywhere. And as soon as you can, say if you're just like, I eat and pay rent, or I pay my student loans. Obviously you do those other things and then you get back on top of your student loans and you get on them aggressively as soon as you can.
Cool. Thank you. It's
Yep.
very helpful.
Any other questions? Thank you all. I have to run to another meeting right now. Running from my couch to my couch, not running anywhere. But I have to run to another meeting. Thank you all so much for coming. And then Stephanie and Sam, I don't know if y'all have anything else that you want to say, but if anybody wants this presentation, because there are some links included in it, we'll send it to you. You should be receiving the budget template. If anybody has any questions or if there's anything, I've been in a lot of debt before and I've worked my way out of it and gotten, I think I've learned from experience. So if anybody has any questions specifically for me, if you would like me to sit with you and, see about tackling some of this stuff for y'all, look me up, Tisha Townsend. I'm on the MSU Denver website. I'll be happy to meet with you and talk to you. We can look at your credit report. We can look at your credit cards if you need help figuring some of that stuff out. I've done it for myself, and like I said, I have a good credit score now, and I have money in savings, and I've really been able to dig myself out of a hole. So I come from some experience, and I don't know all the answers, like that revolving credit one. I don't know all the answers, but I'll try to find them. And whoever asked that question, I will find that answer for you, and I will get that information to you to the best of my ability.
Thank you so much, Tisha.
All right,
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
If anyone else has any questions that you didn't get to ask, Stephanie and I can stay on the line for another 10 minutes or so, but we'll definitely look into some of the questions that we weren't able to ask today and email them out to you. Just be sure that you sign into the Qualtrics form. That way we have your emails. I think that's it. That seems like it was unaddressed. Stephanie, did you have anything? Oh, I can't hear you. We still can't hear you. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we'll stay here if anyone has questions, but thanks so much for joining.